Kristen, you all good to go? All right. I will call to order this PVIS meeting then for July 28th. And I'd like to recognize that collectively we are all joining this meeting from the unceded territory of the Lillooet Nation. Any changes to the agenda? Seeing none, motion to approve as presented. Director Mack, seconded by Director Zant. Any opposed? Motion carries. 3.1, can I get a motion around holding electronic meetings as per M192?
Director Zant.
Seconded by Director Mack. Any discussion? Any opposed? Carries. So we'll go right into delegations. We'll wait for them to join us. Is there anybody else joining us, Ms. Clark? Or are we good? Good. Okay.
Yes.
Good afternoon, Ms. Vaughn. Thank you for joining us. We will turn it over to you when you're ready to go to talk to us about the outdoor garden.
So is it me now? Am I going?
Yes, please.
Okay. Are the photos available to show that I had forwarded, I think, to Philippa or?
Yep, she's going to put them on screen here in a sec.
Okay. Because basically the photos, I would say, tell the whole story.
There you go.
So the project that we did with the grant money was that shade sail that you see in the picture. So that is what the money went towards, to finish up that outdoor classroom gathering extracurricular space. The building was started and then it got finished. The PAC got that shade sail up in order to create shade over the seating and gathering space. So that is what that's what the money went for. Like a lot of projects, you think it's going to be short and simple, and then, you know, today's construction climbs in and the cost soon escalates. So yeah, we use the grant money for that. So I guess, is there any questions before there's anything specific that you're wondering about? I feel like the pictures are fairly self-explanatory, and basically the project is essentially wrapped up.
Nice. So when did it get completed? Did it get used this summer, this spring?
It got used a little this spring. It was up in April it got finished. So it's been, well, I mean, with COVID, of course, there's so much less going on. It's been used twice, I believe, for some First Nations drumming, singing ceremonies that went on. Mm-hmm. And they held them out there as part of the school. So, and there's been a little bit of last fourth quarter usage from the teachers to gather out there. So it's just kind of gotten finished, and the sail will come down in the fall. It doesn't hold snow, and then it'll go up again in the spring. So the plan is, I mean, that little building, the doors open, kind of like, and with this deck, it creates a little mini theater presentation. Lots of opportunities for various extracurricular activities, presentations to be used, or just gathering around the log benches under the shade in that area for teachers to bring their kids outside, or anything, any activities really. You know, the outdoor space is kind of really important these days. And it could also be used by the greater community, you know, just as other school district venues, whether they're gyms or playing fields or whatnot, are used by other youths. There's no reason why other groups in the community couldn't kind of go, hey, let's have here's a great little stage, a little presentation area. We have some shade, some seating. So I foresee it being a good addition to the community at large, right? Just as you add any kind of playing fields or whatnot to the school districts, they can get used by other members of the community, other user groups.
Awesome. I think we'll have to get that word out then a little bit, because I think you're right. I think that could be used by other community groups. I'm thinking Arts Council or the Senior Men's or whatever, but I don't think people are aware of that. So that's something that if a community group wanted to use it, they would book it through the school district, or do you have any idea how that would work?
Well, I don't really know yet, because I don't know how do people book, let's say for the instance, the karate club uses the gym at the Signal Hill. They must, contact the school district and book their times.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know, but I would certainly be happy to follow up with the principal and the school district to find out how other user groups go about doing that, and then get the word out. I don't know who I spread that to, but I could certainly let the regional district and the village know how that goes about. And yeah, it'd be good to see it used, on weekends and after school, and not necessarily during school hours, but yeah, it's a great space for all kinds of people to say, hey, let's meet outside.
Yeah, no, that'd be great if you can throw that information at us at some point. We'll spread it around, let user groups know that. That'd be awesome.
Okay, I will do. I'll follow up with the principal and the school district and get that for you.
Anybody else got any questions? Go ahead, Director Zant.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I just wanted to, you answered my question about the other community user groups being able to use the space, so thank you for that. And I just want to say thanks for coming back and showing us how you used the money. I think it was a great project.
Great.
Especially during COVID, people having to be outdoors more. It's a good asset to have. So thank you very much.
Hopefully, you may see one of these in the future at Signal Hill, which is kind of where the whole project idea started, because they have no shade there whatsoever. Mm-hmm. So that's kind of how the idea came to my head over a year ago for Signal Hill shade. And then things just sort of stalled out there a little bit. And I knew that Pemberton Secondary was looking for something like that. So I kind of just took everything I had in place for Signal Hill and moved it over, and they're in a position to actually sort of press play on it. So it went there first, and which was good because there was a lot of things to learn. This is kind of the first project. Kind of, there wasn't, wasn't a project, but for, oh yeah, we got that. There was a lot of, things to learn, and hopefully, and there's other schools looking at it. Whistler Secondary is kind of looking to do something too.
Thank you.
Any questions or comments? All right, seeing none, thank you very much, Margo. Thanks for reporting back. It's nice to see these projects come together. We see it from one side of the table, and we don't always get to see the completed thing. So
yeah, I was very excited to see it come to fruition. The day that it went up was a very good, exciting thing, because things like this have a tendency to really get bogged down in paperwork and costs, and it took a lot of tenacity and hurdle jumping to actually see it done. Thanks for letting me share it. Am I all done now?
You are. Thanks, Margo.
Okay. Bye.
Awesome. That would be a great thing for other community groups to be able to use. Okay, next up we have Mr. Mendonça from Pemberton TV Society. Go ahead, Ms. Clark.
Chair, he's not in the waiting room yet, so perhaps we can move ahead and come back. Thank you.
Okay, we're on to number 5 then, the consent agenda. Did anybody want to pull anything out? Seeing none, motion to approve is presented. Director Zant, seconded by Director Kennett. Any opposed? Motion carries. Any business arising from the minutes? Seeing none. Staff reports 7.1. CEO verbal report. CEO Helmer.
Thank you, Chair. Just wanted to bring to the attention of some of the committee members that we now have a state of local emergency for the entire Squamish-Lillooet regional district, with fires having sparked in 3 of our 4 electoral areas. At this point, the only fires of concern that have orders or alerts associated are in electoral area B, but we continue to monitor fires right across the region. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions? Motion receive.
Motion to receive.
Seconder. Director Mack. Any opposed? Motion carries. VOP CAO verbal report, Ms. Gilmore.
Thank you. No, I don't have anything to share at this time.
Thank you. 7.3, Rec Services first quarter financials.
Chair,
Yeah, go ahead.
Ms. Clark had her hand up.
Oh, sorry, I didn't see it.
Thanks, Chair. I'm going to admit Miss Martin, Miss LaFrance, and Miss Burns for this item. Thanks.
All right, looks like we got everyone. Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. Once you're all set up, we're on 7.3. We're looking at the Rec Services first quarter financials, and I'll turn it over to you.
All right, good afternoon, everyone. We're here today to go over the, to provide to the PBIS committee with the first quarter financial statement for recreation services. This review marks the first quarter of the fiscal year. At this time, the collection of the revenues and the outlay of expenses should be around 25%. However, consolidated revenues and expenditures are slightly below this percentile due to closures from the COVID-19 pandemic. The first quarter financial statement, which is attached as well, will show the 2021 annual rec budget, revenues and expenses from January 1st through March 31st, 2021. So as we know, COVID-19 was declared a global pandemic. The Pemberton Community Center has been operating under limited services in 2020 and the first quarter of 2021. They have recorded some revenues from programming and fitness center use. The first quarter financial statements show the revenue and expenditures for January through March against the annual budgeted values for the following services: the Community Center, Meadows Fields, Youth Center, Gates Lake, Pemberton Fields, and then a consolidated view. The consolidated view shows that approximately 21% of revenues have been collected. Tax collection for operating and capital projects are received by transfer of funds from the SLRD to the Village of Pemberton after the tax due date of August 2nd. Currently, the budget is operating utilizing the surplus, which was carried forward from 2020. Additional interest revenue and project reserve transfers will be earned throughout the remainder of the year as the projects are completed. On the expenditure side, a total of 16% of budgeted amounts have been expensed. Ongoing projects are still underway, such as the security camera upgrade, which I believe happened in Q2, the basketball court, geothermal improvements, sports field vandalism repair, along with other maintenance expenses and small events that will take place seasonally. The Pemberton Community Center is most affected by the COVID-19 pandemic and continues to be challenged with limited opening and the ability to earn revenues due to the public health orders. Additional cash flows may be required at year end to avoid a deficit and can be accommodated by the reallocation of funds held by the SLRD as an operating reserve. If we'd like to go to the appendix and review any of the accounts within the specific cost centers, we can. Mainly, a lot of these projects are ongoing, and in the first quarter of the year, we didn't go forward with too many of these projects. I think we'll see more as we go into Q2 and Q3, especially as we wait for the transfer of funds from the SLRD in August. Is there anything specific that that you'd like to go over?
It's a question for everyone. Is there any other specific lines that the committee has some questions on? Nope.
Okay. It's pretty typical of first quarter, not
Yeah.
really
Yeah.
doing too much. And especially with the pandemic, we had some limited movement from last year. We have a plan for the remainder of the year for sure, and a bunch of projects that will be reviewed and hopefully completed in the summers. But we'll see that in our future reports.
Okay, thank you. So any questions at this point, committee members? Go ahead, Ms. LaFrance.
I just have a quick question on the children's program revenue. I just noticed it was quite high for a first quarter. It was already 76% of the total budget. So I just wanted to see what that was.
It's probably a prepay for summer programs, most likely when they went on sale.
Thank you. Any other questions? All right, seeing none, can I get a motion to receive the first quarter recreation financials? Moved by Director Mack, second by Director Zant. Any comment? Any opposed? Motion carries. Thank you to the three of you for joining us. Have a good
Can I
afternoon.
make a comment
Hi.
before Ms. Martin
Yeah.
leaves for a moment? I just want to confirm we don't have a PVIS meeting in August, correct? Ms. Helmer, is that correct? Do you know?
Through the chair, that's correct. There's no committee meetings in August.
Okay, so I don't want to call Ms. Martin out, but I just wanted to let everyone know that this will be her last meeting with us. She's actually moving on to the village of Anmore. So I just wanted to let everyone know that we will not see her shining face here anymore, and wanted to wish her the best of luck.
Thanks, Nikki.
Yeah.
Will be missed, Lena.
Thank you.
Thank you for taking all my questions during budget season. I really appreciate it. You made it really easier.
Excellent. You learned something. It's great.
I definitely did. Thank you for your patience.
Perfect.
I'm gonna wait and take other opportunities to make you feel awkward, Lena. So I'm not.
Yeah. Cut me off now.
Awesome. Okay, thanks to all of you. Have a great afternoon, you guys.
Thank you.
So we're gonna go back to, I believe Mr. Mendonça has joined us. So we're gonna go back to 4.2. Are you with us, Mr. Mendonça? Ms. Clark, is he?
Thanks, Chair. I see his window has come up, but I haven't heard from him yet.
Mark, are you there? Okay. Somebody, I don't have his number. Does somebody have the ability to send him a message?
Thanks, Chair. Perhaps I'll put him back in the waiting room and ask Natalie to get a hold of him.
Okay.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, then let's move on in the meantime to 7.4. And this is the Pemberton Area Economic Development Collaborative with our economic development plan. Who's speaking to us on this?
Thanks, Chair. I've admitted Miss Westerholm.
Okay. She is. Good afternoon, Ms. Westerholm. Thank you for joining us. When you're all set up, we're on 7.4, talking about the Regional Economic Development Plan, and I will turn it over to you.
Great, thank you. Hi, it's nice to see everyone. Patricia Westerholm, Communications and Engagement Manager with the SLRD. And I'm here today to answer any questions that you might have about the information report that's in your agenda package regarding the Pemberton and Area Regional Economic Development Plan. The information report does speak a little bit to the history of the Pemberton and Area Economic Development Collaborative and how we came to this point where we're at today with the development of the Regional Economic Development Plan. For a little bit of background on the plan itself, the project was funded through rural dividend with financial and in-kind support from the SLRD, the Village of Pemberton, and Lillooet Nation. And originally, when the application was submitted, it was the intent was that the Pemberton and District Chamber of Commerce was going to act as the lead applicant with the collaborative delivering the development of the plan. And then the Chamber did not have the appropriate financial documents to meet the criteria of the grant application process. So the Village of Pemberton stepped in to take on that role as the lead applicant for the grant. And then in 2019, we were advised that the grant was successful and we received the $100,000 funding through the Rural Dividend Program to move forward with that. So we initially, first step was to develop a subcommittee to with representation from at the staff level from the Village of Pemberton, the SLRD, and the Chamber of Commerce, and to really put that process into place for hiring a consultant to develop the plan and move that forward. So we worked on that and had the consultant in place, and then through over about the course of the next 18 months or so and many virtual meetings with the collaborative, we have now, the plan has been developed and delivered to the collaborative. There was a update provided by Veronica Woodruff in February to this group with a bit of an overview of where that was at. So since that time, the collaborative has received the plan, and we did have a meeting scheduled a couple of weeks ago before the flood situation developed in Pemberton and Area C. So that meeting was canceled just in lieu of the fact that many of the folks on those involved with the Economic Development Collaborative, primarily from the Village and the SLRD and Lillooet Nation, were also involved in the emergency response with regard to the flood situation. So we shifted that meeting, and I believe, I don't think it's been rescheduled at this point, but looking at hopefully in the coming weeks, barring any other emergency pivoting that has to take place. So in the next few weeks, the collaborative will meet again to really dive in a bit more deeply, I think, on where we go from here with the plan now that we have it. The intent all along with this project was to make sure that we didn't end up with a document that would sit on a shelf somewhere and not have much use. So we're really excited about the plan and feel like it has put us in a good position to have a guiding document to help us move forward with some objectives. And so next steps would be for the collaborative to have this next full meeting since having received the plan, and to dig into a work plan a little bit more deeply and come back to our respective boards and councils to update and seek direction as required. And another newish development would be that through the Pemberton and District Initiative Fund, the Chamber of Commerce did secure some ongoing funding for support of the collaborative in some administrative capacity. So that's really great news. So that's where we're at with this plan. So if anyone has any questions, I'd be happy to do my best to try and answer them.
Thank you so much. So just along the lines in terms of the actioning, so like you said, the next step is for the collaborative to meet again, dig a little deeper into this, into some of the recommendations. And then, I mean, you know, within the plan, there's some shorter term, smaller sort of goals, as well as some bigger picture goals. So I assume using that plan to sort of come forward and talk about funding and how we put together some of those actions and come back to our perspective tables. At that point is what we're looking at, I'm assuming.
Yeah, I think that's a good assessment of where we're at. We do have, as the collaborative, a bit of a working spreadsheet, I guess, if you will, of different projects and where some of those tasks could end up landing. You know, there's recognizing that there are things in the plan that obviously fall within different areas of jurisdiction. And then, but it's of course not necessarily up to, the decision doesn't necessarily rest with the collaborative on how to approach some of those tasks moving forward or who they should land with. So that's where I would anticipate having to come back to to this group and the board for direction if we get to that, when we get to that point of having a bit more of a better understanding of some of those initial projects that we could be working on and where those where the needs might lie in terms of who's going to actually be the doers, if you will, in getting some of that work done.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Any questions? Go ahead, Director Kennett.
I just have a comment I'd like to make. Thank you for all your work that you've put into this document. I'm really interested in seeing the objectives sort of being met, like some of the doing part and what the overall some of the projects and so are on. And so maybe at a later date in the fall or something, the committee can come forward and present something to us that's a little more concrete.
Yeah, I think that's sort of the direction that Ms. Westerholm just laid out for us. Like you say, though, there's a lot of good plans, and now how do we, like she said, how do we action them? Who takes the lead? Where does the funding go? That'll go to budget conversations and different within all of our municipalities or districts. So yeah, that's definitely the plan. Same, I look forward to seeing some of the actions come out of it.
Yeah, and I should note also that one of the more immediate tasks of the collaborative is to also appoint a new chair or the next chair, which my understanding is that Councillor Craddock from the Village of Pemberton is the current chair of the collaborative, but that I believe his term has been extended beyond what it usually would be, but given the pandemic and those sorts of things. And we haven't been able to meet, obviously, in person for some time. So that probably will take place at an upcoming, well, it will take place at an upcoming meeting. I'm assuming the next one, but we would have an update on that as well.
Great, thank you. Any other questions or thoughts?
Thank you for the report.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. And like I think you've heard, we're all anxious to see what we can do with it, as I'm sure you have been part of it. So now comes the exciting part, I hope. So thank you so much, Ms. Westerholm. We look forward to seeing what comes out and talking about it again soon. I guess we should get a motion to receive this report.
Motion to receive.
Councillor Zant, seconded by Director Mack. Any opposed? Motion carries. Okay, it looks like we've got our tech issues settled, so we're going to go back to 4.2 and see if we could admit everyone.
Hello?
Well, we can hear you. We can't see you, but we can hear you.
Okay, here, one sec. There we go.
All right, perfect. Let's get moving before we run into any problems here. So thanks for joining us, everybody. We're here to talk about the Pemberton TV Society, and I will turn it over to Mr. Mendonça to tell us what's up.
Ready for me?
Yeah, go ahead.
So I guess most recently I attempted to have an AGM. Tried to put it out in the paper 3 times, only managed to do it twice. The peak messed up, but they gave me a half-page ad, so it was very obvious, or should have been very obvious. And we had 0 attendees. So it's at that point, if you don't have a board, you don't have a quorum, you can't have a society. So at this point, I have not renewed the society. I don't think there's any point in really moving forward. This is financially, we just can't keep going. There's obviously no money to keep it going. So we have to look at the next steps. The next steps are removing the towers, equipment, etc. I'd be happy to engage to work with it to done, but there's really not much I can do in terms of answering any questions for anybody, because my answer is going to be we have no money. So I'm not sure, what the next step is from Peevis's point of view, but that's really it. I mean, I've been at this for 3 years, and it's just been a challenge all the way through. And frankly, we did a report, and we never did actually read or go through the report. So I'm not sure what was that. I'm not sure what came of it. Was there something that I missed out on? Anyway, that's about it.
How would,
have any questions?
if we were to remove the tower and all that, does that mean we no longer get CBC radio transmission?
CBC radio comes from another broadcasting tower. You wouldn't get CBC radio 2, you'll just get CBC.
Right. So by dissolving and removing the equipment, we're losing obviously the television capacity and CBC radio 2, but CBC radio.
Yeah, we could pick up 3 or 4 additional radio stations, but the equipment would require the equipment on the ground would require some upgrades to do that. We tried to broadcast a couple additional signals, but they're not strong enough basically to get past the community center. So if those signals can be rebroadcast from the mountainside, then the community can enjoy a number of radio stations. But outside of that, yeah.
And sorry, Mark, just to be clear, what you just described, that's with the CBC tower, or that would have been the case if we maintained our other equipment?
The CBC tower is a standalone. It's got nothing to do with us. It'll continue to broadcast CBC radio.
Right.
What we were broadcasting was CBC Radio 2.
I see.
Which
Okay.
gave you music as opposed to mostly a talk show.
Yeah. Okay.
And then we have the capability of broadcasting a number of other. We have the capability of sending out a bulletin via any of those stations to the community citizens about a flood or whatever else might be going on.
Mm-hmm. Okay, any questions from the committee? Or thoughts or comments? Go ahead, Director Mack.
Yeah, I think it's very important that we, I think before we start taking things down, we need to get a plan as to what we can keep in service from that emergency point of view with the radios. So maybe we could just get staff to, come back with a report now for the September Peevis meeting, just to say, this is what we have to do in order to keep the existing radio stations and add more to it. And then we can decide from there where we're going to go as far as finances. But I think it's really important to to keep that ability to broadcast out for emergency purposes, if nothing else. Thanks.
So to understand what you're looking at is, or what you're asking for is to have a look at the possibility of just maintaining the radio capacity, the radio broadcast capacity, remove the television capacity, and is that possible, and what would that cost look like?
Yes, yes.
Okay. Mark, did you have any information you want to add on that?
I completely agree that it should be looked at from the aspect of emergency communication. And your contact for that, who has the most information, would be Richard Doucette.
Yeah. Okay. Any other thoughts?
I just have a
Go ahead.
I just have a question for you, Mark. Exactly, we're getting a few radio, CBC, and is there any television at all? I know my neighbor was disappointed that he doesn't get it right now, but I was just wondering, it just went off, he said. He managed to get something going across the road from me. So I don't know.
Well,
I'm just wondering, if there's anything that we're providing right now?
technically, there should be 2 stations running, but we could have a problem at this point, and we're not investing any manpower or any dollars to investigate if there is a problem.
Okay.
You know, the issue is nobody knows who to really turn to. The issue is we did a survey and it was done mostly electronically. So the people who really use it, they never did respond. They don't know about the survey, and just like, you know, trying to have a board meeting. Anyway, that's neither here nor there. To answer your question, if it's still running, because I don't use the service myself, there would probably be 2 stations running right now.
2 TV stations.
That's correct.
Yeah. And 3 radio stations, or?
No. Right now, we only have the capacity to run 2 TV stations if they're running. Like the equipment is just failing. It's all failing.
Mhm.
So
Yeah.
the newer stuff, yeah, take a little bit of a hit in the front end, but it's all new digital. You know, it's going to last as long as, you know, scenario.
It's my understanding that there are still some folks that are getting some things free, right?
No,
That
I
we
think
have
what
been providing, so.
Yeah. So as Mr. McDonald says, it's being broadcast. If there's any problems or interruptions, we don't have the capacity. They don't have the capacity to
Fix
go
it, yeah.
and look
No,
at. So
I
it
yeah.
could end any second. Okay. So then let's look at a motion. If I can get a motion there, Director Mack, to have staff bring back some information as to what it would take to maintain the radio and broadcast capabilities. Let's start with that. Motion to that effect.
Yeah, I'll make that motion.
Seconder.
I'll second that.
And Director Kennett, any further discussion?
One question, Chair.
Go ahead.
So if this, we say that all this goes through, would this then become an asset of the village and the SLRD, or is that a part of that? I'm assuming that'd be part of the report. I'm just curious.
I think that's part of the issue. As Mark said, he tried to get an AGM together, and there's not a lot of interest. So I think what we're going to have to look at is how this, you know, if staff come back and says it's X dollars to maintain the broadcast capability in a few radio stations, and we can remove the television, and the committee feels it's a cost that we want to look at over the next few years, then the follow-up question is going to be, okay, who's looking after it? How does this work?
Okay.
In light of the fact that the society has struggled to maintain its status.
Understood. Thank you.
Ms. Helmer, did you have anything to add to that thought?
Thank you, Chair. That I think we have clear understanding.
Thank you.
Chair?
Go ahead, Director Mack.
Yeah, I would just like to add that as Mr. McDonald has said, Richard Doucette should be contacted to get his advice, expertise on this, situation, so that when that report comes back in September, we know exactly where we're at and don't have to start going and asking questions after the fact.
Okay.
Thanks.
Okay, if there's no further discussion, I'll call the question. Any opposed? Motion carries. And maybe a follow-up to that, whether broadcasting radio or not, Mark's talking about removing equipment. What kind of budget implications do those look like? And similarly, if we do go with the radio broadcast, if we're able to manage that, sounds like we still have some equipment to remove and some work to be done. So I'm just wondering what the budget implications might be on that. I don't know if anybody has that answer, or they could bring that back for the next meeting as well.
If I might say that, I could imagine that the cost of the removal of the equipment is going to be pretty close to the cost of maintaining radio. By the time you get helicopters involved, which you're going to have to bring multiple loads down from the mountain, it probably is going to cost you the same just to bring in the equipment that you'll need for the radio alone.
Okay, well, that's good to know. It'd be good to have some hard numbers on that if we can. Okay, any other comment? All right, thank you for joining us, Mr. Mendonca, for your work on this. We appreciate it.
Thank you.
Have a great afternoon. Okay, so that brings us back to 7.5. 7.5, this is the Pemberton District Initiative Fund Review. Is anybody joining us on this?
Ms. Campbell's here for this.
Perfect.
Thanks.
All right, Ms. Campbell, when you're ready to go, it's all yours.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Philippa Campbell, I'm Project and Research Coordinator at the SLRD and assisting to administer the fund. The report before you is to provide some information on the current status of the report, as well as a little bit of a forecast into 2022. So you can see what it looks like ahead of the next application round, which should be happening. The cutoff date for the 2022 intake is October 15th of this year. And we also have a couple of direction requests that will just help clarify a couple of items and help assist staff to prepare for that 2022 intake. The fund status is broken down into both the arts, culture and recreation and the economic development stream. And it's got the current amounts in the fund for this year remaining. And the forecast looks ahead. We have sort of calculated out for the agreements that are multi-year agreements. Once they've been taken out of the equation, what will be left in that fund? And that just kind of gives you an overview of what's left for each of those two streams again. So the tables in the report provide those numbers. And there are two attachments that give a little bit more detail on what the agreements are, a bit of a summary on what the agreements are, what has gone out this year as well. So I'm happy to take questions or to look at specific areas or to sort of step through the direction requests. There's sort of the couple of options provided for each of the requests that we have, which would be of assistance to staff. So to the chair.
Thank you. So I have thoughts and questions on the direction request. Maybe before we get to that, is there any information on the body of the report about the fund? Any thoughts? We're all good with what's presented. Very clear. Thank you. It is a great report. Thank you for that, Ms. Campbell. Maybe let's just start going through the direction requests, and we can go one by one on that. Let's see. What page are the direction requests?
Apologies, I'm just pulling them up myself. We are looking at page 6 of 12 of the report. I'm sorry, I don't have the agenda page. I can.
52.
Thank you.
Everybody got that? Good. Okay. So, did you want to take us through it, or you want me to lead that, Ms. Campbell?
Whatever your preference is, Chair.
Go ahead. You started off for us.
No problem. So the first one, we have 2 groups who, in anticipation of them applying next year, they may or may not apply. They are coming off the sort of the funding agreement through CHIOF, and we're just looking to understand what they might be eligible for under PDIF, just so that we can direct those applicants and sort of streamline the process. So the options are that they're under sort of they have 2 different cases. I believe Pemberton BMX is on sort of was on annual funding. So we'd like to know if they would be eligible for all 3 funding types under PDIF. And just for a refresher, those are long-term funding, seed funding, which decreases year over year, and a one-time funding. So we're looking to understand if Pemberton BMX would be eligible for all of those coming off their GEOF annual funding. So perhaps we should stop there and we'll do them one by one.
Sure, thank you. So these, I mean, we, just for everybody's recollection, in the past, both of these groups were funded year over year through KEOF and through Area C amenity funds, sort of as an ongoing basis. So the question to us here is, do we want to carry that on as a long-term year over year thing? Do we want to look at one of the other types of funding? What are people's thoughts on that?
That's a question.
Yeah, go ahead.
Do we know what they want to do before we go into a long conversation about maybe making assumptions, or should we wait until we receive an application?
I think the idea was to give them a little bit of direction in terms of what is available to them or what we're willing to consider. Is that what you're thinking, Ms. Campbell?
Through the chair, thank you. That was the intention of bringing this request now, was to sort of streamline the process rather than get to the application point and then have to go backwards. So if this is something that the committee is comfortable looking at now, then it's presented now. As I mentioned, the applications haven't come in, but just knowing that there is a transition from one type of funding to another, if this was information that would be helpful for these applicants in the lead up stage, that's why we'd be presenting it now. Happy to take direction on timing, however.
Sure. Long-term funding, within the policy, do we have a cap, or do we apply caps to long-term funding when people apply for that? Is it in perpetuity, or do we put 5 years, or how does that work?
The policy, the cap is for 5 years. The policy does refer to 3-year funding with 2-year renewals as a method of allowing the committee to have decision points within that 5-year period. So 5 years is the maximum, and we do have some current applicants who are on that 5-year agreement, but 3 years with 2 years renewal is also outlined in the policy.
So just to get the conversation going, in my mind, both of these groups, both BMX and PORC, are groups that are always going to be doing ongoing work and provide pretty cool services and assets to the community. I'm personally happy to consider long-term funding for both of these groups so that they have some security over funding. Yeah, those are my thoughts to get it going. Go ahead, Director Zant.
Yeah, I was going to say I agree with you. I think both PBMX and PORCA are big assets to the community and helping the youth keep busy. I think having them giving them long-term funding will give them an idea to make plans further into the future, as opposed to say 3 and then 2-year allowances. Like you said, if we give them long-term funding, then or at least maybe they can plan 5, 10, 15 years ahead.
I mean, our goal is always to have groups become self-sufficient at some point, so that when the next community group comes forward and says, hey, we want to build this asset for the community, we have funds to support them. So I really like both these groups. I'm happy to support them long term. You know, I think it is important that we have the check-ins and continue to encourage groups to make their own, you know, find ways to finance themselves, again, to free up these funds for other great stuff that might come up in the community. Yeah, personally, I'm happy to go with the long-term 3 and 2 on both of these.
Chair?
Go ahead.
And then just after that, I guess they can reapply. Once the 5 years stop, they can keep reapplying.
Yeah.
With the idea that, I mean, as the committee, we try to express that it'd be, the hope is that you become self-sustaining.
Yeah. Director
Thank you.
Kennett. Thanks, Director Kennett.
My comment is my gut feeling is 5 years is too far out. I'm more in agreement with, say, a 3-year sort of funding cycle, only because we're still sort of at the end of the COVID, hopefully, and things are still in flux, right? You know, and money's coming in and the tax base and all of that. We just don't know, right? We're dealing with unknowns, right? And I think from a 5-year, but I'm in total agreement of funding these 2 organizations. But I'm just thinking, you know, 5 years might be too far out, like a 3-year funding with an option. That's just my gut feeling.
Director Mack.
Chair?
Go ahead.
Yeah, should we not consider too, like the election cycle? You know, if we do it for 5 years, potentially, we may not be here making those decisions. So maybe if we keep it within an election cycle, then we're not saddling somebody else with our decisions. Other people can, you know, they may have different priorities. Thanks.
So Ms. Campbell, you said that within the policy, it was a 5-year long-term had a 3-year check-in. So it's 3 years plus a 2-year renewal?
It's 3 years through the chair, 3 years with the option to renew for 2 further years. And I believe that would have to be reassessed each year. I do believe that was built in to address the term piece that Director Mack has just raised. And just to clarify for this particular piece, appreciating the discussion about the length is relevant. You know, neither of these groups have put in an application yet. We're just, I do just want to ensure that we have the you know, the type of funding that they're eligible for understood as well. Particularly, I believe, because Porker itself came off seed funding, and within PDIF, going seed funding, I don't believe you can apply for seed funding directly after receiving seed funding, for example. Like, that is specific to a project that is supposed to complete. So just wanted to put that out there as a point of clarification. To circle back, 3 years, and there are 2 one-year renewal windows built into that.
Awesome. Okay. Sounds like we were so smart months ago that we already built in these protections. So why don't we break it down? The first one here, BMX. Can we have a motion that directs staff to, you know, when they're in contact with this group, to let them know they're eligible for all 3 types of funding: long-term, seed funding, and one-time? Somebody like to make that motion? Director Zant, seconded by Director Mack. Any further discussion? Any opposed? Motion carries. And with PORCA, to direct staff that PORCA would be eligible for one-time and long-term funding. Moved by Director Mack, seconded by Director Kennett. Any discussion? Any opposed? Motion carries. Okay, the next category is the economic development stream capacity. Go ahead, Ms. Campbell.
Okay, thank you very much. So when you have a look at the 2021 status report for the economic development stream, there's very few funds remaining. There's just 4,564 for the year, which is actually under the threshold for the amount the committee allocated for one-time funding requests in this year. So we've already kind of dropped below that that line with the funding that has been provided this year. So just a reminder that in this year, available funds were greater than we would anticipate moving forward because there was some surplus carried over. So as we move into the next couple of years, there's going to be less funding available for the 2022 intake, for example. And just a quick reminder from the table 4, it's the forecast for 2022. Once you take out the applications that have, they've already been made, the long-term applications that'll be coming out of this fund, we're left with a balance of 14,750 in the economic development stream. So that's what's currently available for the intake, being mindful that there'll be some change to that as we come towards the end of the year. So historically, we've had quite high requests from this particular stream, and we have got some allocations that are sort of quite high. The chamber, I think, is on $27,500. The Tourism Pemberton has received $20,000 this year. So those are the level of requests that are coming through this stream. So we are looking for some direction to address this for future years, to see if there are some ways to address the limited funds that we see here. And there is a couple of options there for consideration. I'll hand it back to the chair just for now.
Thank you. So yeah, there's a number of options presented here to be able to deal with this. We all know that we're oversubscribed moving forward in the economic development. So I'm sorry, Ms. Campbell, did you want to take us through 1 to 4, or is it pretty straightforward for everybody?
I mean, we've tried to outline the options there fairly well. I mean, they're all at this stage explore options. You know, there's some mechanics to be worked out for each of them. None of them are a definite way to increase those funds. And some of them do require looking at the policy and looking at what has been done, what has been set in the policy, and maybe opening it up in ways that the committee hasn't considered yet. So there's, each of them has ramifications. But aside from that, if they are straightforward for the group, I'll hand it back.
So, I mean, I think again, we recognize the challenge with the economic fund being oversubscribed. We struggled with Tourism Pemberton, the amount of funds we had available to support them. I think option 1, changing the requisition is a fairly big task to put on staff at this time. And I think if and when we do make that move, we do it with a lot more consideration in terms, so we don't have to do it again in 2 years, so that it's done with a lot of forethought. I don't know if we want to have that big a conversation now or set that in motion right now, but I'm open to hearing what the committee has to say on it. I think, the idea of number 2 of a contribution service is also a really interesting idea. Also a big job, but might sustain some of these groups a little bit better moving forward. So I think that's something I would like to definitely park and not lose sight of. And then number 3, something we talked about, can groups join in off of or apply to both sets of funds? Another option that Ms. Gilmore suggested to me when we were just kicking things around was just as perhaps a bit of a short-term fix, is one thing the committee could consider is taking the farmers market funding and moving that to the arts and culture, I think, fund, where there is a little bit more leeway. Now, the arts and culture fund has a carryover, We see the BMX and the Porca. I feel, coming up, I think the more people hear about it, the more that there's going to be a request for the arts and culture. So I think we're going to see less of a carryover in the years to come. So I don't want to overstretch that one either. But yeah, one option would be to take the farmers market, move it to arts and culture, and that would free up. Sorry, remind me how much the farmers market gets. Somewhere.
6,000.
6,000. So that would free up $6,000 within the economic fund, which would allow us to look at our funds a little bit more closely and how we separate them with chamber and tourism Pemberton, that sort of thing. So yeah, that is another option that we could look at. It's a bit of a short-term fix, and then we could perhaps explore a contribution service down the road. And I'm also happy to have a conversation around groups being able to apply to either funds and changing the policy in that way. Anybody like to weigh in? Director Mack.
Yeah, it almost seems that we're going to have to make a decision on increasing the level of funds that are in both streams, because if we start allowing people to or groups to take money from both streams, you might end up with it being monopolized by one or two groups, depending on the size of their ask, right? So I think what we need to do is determine exactly how much funding we want to put towards these endeavors, and then and just see if that's sustainable. But yeah, I just as it comes up, we just don't have enough money in each stream for the amount of people applying and for the amount they're applying for.
Yeah.
Thanks.
We are, I mean, we've been pretty quick to approve people's asks to the dollar figure. Rarely have we said, hey, we'd like 5,000, sorry, we can only give you 3, because we always recognize the great work that these groups are doing. So we always struggle with that. That is an option in front of us. And I agree with you. I think in the, if not this year and if not next year, then definitely the year after, both funds will be oversubscribed. So I think we will have to get to a point where we're either looking at increasing the maximum requisition, or option 2, which is a contribution service to help with some of that funding. So I agree. I think we definitely have to look at that. My thought is that, we don't meet till September. We're going to roll right into budget season. We know staff's workload in both our organizations. So I'm reluctant to support going ahead with number 1 or number 2 right now. I feel like that's a lot for staff. I'd like to set us up to be able to manage the requests that come in this year. We could see what those numbers look like when they all add up, to Director Mack's point, and see, okay, well, this is year 2 of the fund, and we're already, we only have 10 grand left here. We have nothing left there. Let's start that process early on in 2022 to figure out, again, whether we go with option 1 and or 2 to extend the funding. But I feel like we should come up with a bit of a short-term approach just to get through this next round of applications. And again, recognizing staff capacity and time, and then set number 1 and 2 into motion. Does that make sense to you, Russell, in light of what you just said? Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. I totally agree with you.
Can I ask staff to maybe just explain to the committee a little bit more what exploring the contribution service would look like, how that would work, just so that make sure everybody knows?
Not a ton of work has gone into this so far. Again, just being at the explore stage, but knowing, if there is, information, data to suggest that there are groups that, would benefit from and require stable long-term funding, that could be looked at as a contribution service, and then sort of addressed through the budgeting system. Instead, it's, I believe there are other places where that has been done, other jurisdictions where that has been done. It's possible that the work through that economic development collaborative could provide some, could also inform the process in terms of what is looking to be achieved through that particular plan, knowing you just had a presentation on that as well. But in terms of the mechanics, what that looks like with the current bylaw that we have in place, have not explored that in depth, but it was more a case of looking at what the requirements, what the requests have been from groups, and trying to see if there was a way to make that more stable, rather than this sort of ongoing, a changing funding situation like we have here.
Mm-hmm. CL Homer, can you add something for us?
Yes, thank you, Chair. So the contribution service would be set up as a service establishment bylaw. So it would go through the entire process. One of the principles for the regional district funding is if the intent is intended to be permanent or of a semi-permanent nature, that's something that we can look at. But there are a number of service establishments that need to be completed at this point, which the committee is aware of. So that process would involve a dialogue with the group in terms of what their long-term funding would be, as well as with all of yourselves as to what taxation level you would like to set. That would be a separate bylaw that would be specific to that particular group that would continue similarly to the society that was presenting earlier today, where they have a contribution service that the taxing area is taxed each year. That money is then made available. It's a long process. When it gets to its turn in the queue for service establishment, it generally takes at least 6 to 9 months for that to occur. And there are a lot of timelines involved, deadlines that have to be met. So for example, everything has to be done by October in order to be applicable for 2022 year. 6 to 9 months is physically impossible. So there's a number of timelines that also tie into when those things can come into play. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. So to follow that up, just to be clear for everyone, if we were to go that route, recognizing that there's a bunch of service contribution areas that are in the queue, at the very earliest, we would be looking at 2023, if not 2024, for having it in place and the taxation being in place. So just so everybody understands that is that accurate, Ms. Helmer? That's what
that would be correct.
Yeah, and so, but I think it's important. I still don't think we should lose sight of it, because we did set up this PDIF fund to support groups and initiatives and call it fun stuff that goes on in our community. If it gets, the work of Tourism Pemberton and the Chamber, for instance, and some of these other groups is super important. I feel like at a certain point, does that, as Staff said, does that become better placed as a service and through the budget process, as opposed to grants and aid, which is what PDIF is. So I think it does. When we look in the long term, I think our economic development, we all talk about economic development throughout at the beginning of all of our terms. I think that is definitely something we want to consider down the road. Again, I recognize that that's not something we could tackle right now, but I would like to park that, I think, for the future, because I think it's an important conversation, probably for the next committee at this point. I'll get to you in a second. Jan, I just want to ask Ms. Helmer one more question. If we were to go with option 1 and increase the maximum requisition, at what point would we need to begin that process, or could we get it done for 2023? And at what point will we need to start that process to do that?
Okay, thank you, Chair. So that process is very similar, because it would be an amendment to a service establishment bylaw. Ms. Campbell did provide the link to the one, for example, for the economic development towards the beginning of this report. And in order for us to change a bylaw, we have to go through the exact same process we did to establish the bylaw. So we'd have to amend the bylaw. We still have to go out for electorate approval. We still need to go to the inspector of municipalities. We still have that whole walk we have to do before it would apply. And again, it would be then prioritized as one of the service establishments as to when exactly that would get completed. So the same observation that you made, that 2023 would be the earliest and we could be looking beyond, that would apply to option number 1 as well.
Okay, thanks. I just want to give people a sense of that, because it obviously impacts our decision here, and that's why I'm interested in looking at the farmers market or any other options that we can do to make sure that we can meet the needs in the short term. So I think we need to consider that short term and then put one of these two into the queue for whenever it can get action. Go ahead, Jen. Thanks for waiting.
The only comment I have is I'm in agreement with you, Mike. I think that the Chamber of Commerce and the Tourism Pemberton are sort of part of the economic stream, really, within the community, and I think that should be in a line item in the budget, and they should be funded every year through a requisition. Mm-hmm. And that's just my feeling, and I understand that there's work in that, but for long-term economic health of the community, I think it's important to have a consistent funding for those two organizations, for sure.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So let's...
And just an add on that with the Tourism Pemberton, they received the $20,000, which I'm sure they were grateful for, but that was only a one-time ask, right? So we're going to be going through all of this again for their ask again, right? And I think that they do like integral work for economic benefit of the community. So
yeah,
whatever amount we decide on later, but it's, I think we need to have consistency year after year for those two organizations.
That's why we're having this conversation right
now. Yeah.
So again, let's break it back down, recognizing that, long-term solutions are just that. They're going to be longer term. The shorter term options right now to deal with what's coming forward as the applications come forward in the fall is either option 3, or we'll call it option 4, which is moving the farmers market over, and any other option that somebody else might have. Let's start with those, and then we'll go back to longer term in a second here. If we were to move the $6,000 over to Rec and Arts and Rec, then that would pretty much allow just enough funding, I believe, if my math is right, just enough funding for both the Chamber and Tourism Pemberton at the levels we funded them last year. Just trying to get back to that table. Is my math right on that? 50 grand. It was just
through the chair. If you were to do that, that would be, if you go to page 12 of the report, or page 58, it shows you the numbers, and the 2021 commitment to the two groups would total 47,500 if the 6,000 was moved elsewhere.
So by moving the 6,000 in farmers market to the other fund, we have enough funds available to fund both these groups to the same amounts as last year, with a tiny little bit left over. Again, I think we're going to see more pressure on the Arts and Rec fund as well, but we do have the, if next year is anything like last year, we do have a little bit more wiggle room there for sure. So is this something we want to consider? Does anybody have any other ideas how we can try to accommodate both Tourism Pemberton and Chamber for this year? And again, we'll look at the long-term solutions in a second. Go ahead, Ms. Helmer.
Thank you, Chair. I just had a question for you, being new to this myself, was it previously the case that the Village of Pemberton and Area C each contributed some money to these groups before the PDIF was created and merged? Mm-hmm. So if that was the case, there could be a potential for each organization as well to put a little bit in there to top it up if the intent was to change the bylaw, but an interim fix was required to tide things through.
Right. Go ahead, Ms. Gilmore.
With respect to that, we've actually dissolved the fund that we previously had allocated towards kiosk. So there's nothing left in that from a budgetary perspective. That would need to be brought back and discussed at the council table, which would have a percentage increase for the taxpayers. Yeah, we don't have a special fund that we could access. It's not something we are opposed to necessarily doing if the committee would like us to pursue that.
Yeah, and that would be, just to be clear, that wouldn't happen until budget process. I'm pretty sure the rest of council wouldn't want to approve anything without looking at other budget items coming up. But it could be a good solution to also park and look at as we look at the 2-3 year plan. Go ahead, Director Kennett.
I think it's something to consider to reactivate that if it's possible. Because it gives you another little fund that you can kind of.
It wouldn't be reactivating. What we would be doing is we would be going to the budget through the budget.
Yeah, but we have to reintroduce it. Yeah.
No, we would have to say that right now we contribute X amount of dollars to the PDIF fund through our budget. We would have to increase. It has nothing to do with kiosk anymore. What CEO Gilmore was saying is the funds that used to be in kiosk no longer exist. So if we were to increase amounts of PDIF, we would have to go through our regular budget process and decide whether there was more funds or the council wanted to put more funds into this PDIF. So yeah, the point is that I think what Nikki was trying to say is there aren't any funds sitting around, not that they're sitting around, but Director Mack has access to amenity funds that he could use and contribute on the spot. We don't have that. We would have to go through the full budget process and look at it in light of all the other pressures on our budget. Does that make sense?
Well, the funds must have gone somewhere.
Yeah, they went.
Right, if there was funding there, they went back into the PDF. Okay.
Yeah, all the funds we used to put into kiosk and the other fund. We had 2 funds previously. And
I understand that, Mike. I just was wondering when Director or Ms. Gilmore said that they did away with the fund. So I was just wondering what that meant.
Yeah. No, so that, we kept the one going a little bit. There was a bit of an overlap with kiosk and PDIF, and now that's gone. So if we want to add more funds, it has to go through our full budget process, which would be pretty late in the day in terms of Tourism Pemberton and Chambers requests, because they come, as we see, early in the fall. So again, it's something we could consider. We could look at through. We could certainly give direction to have that brought up to the village. To council when the Village of Pemberton does its budget, but once again that won't serve us for setting our funds for this year. So yeah,
Can I make a comment, Chair? I think one of the reasons we wanted everything to be in one fund was sort of that one-stop shop, and it was kind of to guide community groups to go to one area to look for funds, because we were having community groups come to one aspect of the village and then come to the SLRD. And, I think then we'd start going on a slippery slope back into that process where we could just increase the funds, or maybe we'll have to say in the meantime, unfortunately, we don't have funds to support that to the level you want, as you suggested, until we're able to deal with that. And I mean, just my personal opinion, I think 2023 is going to be that's really soon, given the amount of work that it takes to make these changes.
Yeah, so really we're trying to bridge, so to speak, now till probably the 2024 cycle to really, how do we, we got requests coming up for 2022 in a few months, not even. We've proposed the farmers market thing maybe as a quick solution to handle that request. Hopefully we have enough funds going into 2023, and here, before we're done, we'll set into motion how we're going to deal with things after, again, mid to long term. So how do people feel about moving the farmers market over? Let's just break it down here. We move the $6,000 of farmers market over. It allows us to once again fund Chamber and Tourism Pemberton to the same levels we did this year.
Sure.
I'll move that.
I'll second that.
Good discussion. Any opposed? Oh, go ahead, Jen.
My question is, so where does the farmers market, where do they apply for their funding then?
The Arts and Recreation Fund, the other
Arts
side
and
of it.
Recreation, and there's going to be some there for them.
We have
We're hoping.
$24,000 leeway in there right now.
Surplus there. Okay, good. Okay, I'm all for that.
Okay, I'll call the question then. Any opposed? Motion carries. And then looking ahead so that this isn't so clumsy every year, again, we reckon that'll hopefully help us deal with 2022, 2023. Let's see, I think what we do is this year we see the funding requests that come in by the end of the fall, and that'll give us some idea what we got to look ahead to 2023. And then we could have another conversation. But then looking at the further ahead, we need to get something into the queue here for addressing this, to mid to the long term. So I don't know if I want to pick option one or option two at this point. I think that we've heard a few of us say that we feel like economic development could be a budget contribution service. If we did that, that would remove close to $50,000, and therefore I feel like we wouldn't need to increase our requisition on PDIF. It would give us $50,000 flex for the years to grow. What's the will of the committee? Do we want to look at a contribution service, or do we want to look at increasing the requisition? Or if staff feels that we don't have to make that decision now, we could put both in the queue and get more input from staff down the road, I'm okay with that.
Chair?
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I would go with option number 2. That would be my preference.
I feel like it makes more sense. I feel like it establishes a certain level of economic development activity in the valley as part of that budget and contribution service. So, anyone else? What are other people's thoughts?
Chair, I agree with Director Mack. I think number 2 is our best option at this point.
Okay. And is it helpful, Ms. Helmer, right now, if we were to choose 2 or 1, or is it something, like I say, we want to get it in the queue, recognizing it's going to take a while. Do you want us to be specific 1 to 2 right now, or did you want staff to have the flexibility to explore it a little bit more?
Thank you, Chair. I think that if the intention is a permanent or semi-permanent continuation of funding, that having that clarity that that's the direction the committee would like to go in would be helpful. So yes, that's appreciated. Thank you.
Okay. So I'm hearing support for option 2. Would somebody like to make that motion?
I'll make that motion.
Seconder, Director Zent. Further discussion? Any opposed? Motion carries. Okay, thank you for that. And then the next part, just got to get back, is presentation format for reporting and applications. Ms. Campbell, did you want to give us some information?
I can indeed. These are just a couple of housekeeping requests for direction, just as we work through come up to the new intake process based on learnings from the previous year. So we're just looking for just direction around the reporting and presentation process. The first option is actually relates to another report on this agenda, and I would look for advice as to whether we should leave the conversation until we get to that particular report. But basically, it's just asking to move the reporting date, which would be for final reports for projects that have finished, but also progress reports for applicants on multi-year agreements. That's the reporting date is December 1, and we're just looking to move that to sort of more of a mid-November to allow the administration time to collect the reports, collect the presentations, set up the PVIS meeting for December. Perhaps I'll just throw that up to see if that is something we should discuss with that report to the chair.
Any thoughts on that, anyone? I mean, that seems to make good sense.
Yeah, makes sense to me.
Go ahead, Director Mack.
Yeah, I totally agree with what Philippe is saying. I mean, give staff the time they need to do their job with just so they have time to do it without being rushed with a short time frame. So whatever they think is the right time, let's talk about it.
Yeah, I mean, it doesn't impact any of our budget discussions because it's all within the fund. So I don't see any harm in putting it later. Ms. Gilmore, is there anything from our side in terms of how administration, that shouldn't change anything, right?
No, shouldn't have any impacts.
Okay. Okay, how about we take us through all four and then we'll do a motion to address all four items. So structure meetings with breaks. These are all pretty simple. Removing the need to present to committee for one-time requests.
So through the chair, that would be the policy requests that one-time requests that where the activities happen over a year, that those applicants submit a report and then also present to PEVIS. So there may be an opportunity there to sort of remove that for one-time requests that are just funding a single event or activity. So they could present a written report, but not present to the committee. So just, for example, the presentation today by the Pemberton Secondary School on the shade cloth, that is the kind of request that you might not see coming to the committee. So if the preference is to have the ability to see these projects once they're complete, then you may wish to maintain the presentation to the committee.
How do committee members feel about that? Do we want presentations after a one-time funding to see the results of it? Are we happy with a presentation? Go ahead, Ryan, Director Zant.
Yeah, I think seeing the results after the fact is nice as well. Having them come back and just so we can report back to the public on what's happened is still a good idea.
I mean, it's added work, but I do kind of sometimes I hadn't even seen the shade cover. I'm at the high school all the time. I hadn't even seen that, so yeah. It is kind of nice to see the results. I would agree. Anyone else? Okay, so with those, where did it go? So there was basically 3 items presented for direction. Can I get a motion that the option number 1 gets supported? So changing the reporting date to mid-November.
I'll make that motion.
As well as that meetings are structured with breaks to allow for presentation overrun. And I think that's it.
I'll second it.
Any discussion? Any opposed? Motion carries. And I think that covers all the direction requests. Ms. Campbell, is there anything else you'd like from the committee?
I believe that is the report needs covered, but
perfect.
Through.
Any final comments or questions from the committee or staff? Seeing none, thank you very much, Ms. Campbell, for taking us through that. Much appreciated. And we're still on PDIF. So 7.6 is the Pemberton Canoe Club or Canoe Association request. Back to you.
Thank you, Chair. The Canoe Association contacted us just to indicate that they had made an application in error due to misunderstanding the funds. Their letter is included with this report that sort of outlines the situation, and they did want to be considered for a move from the seed funding, which they applied for in error, to an annual funding agreement for a 3-year term. So staff has taken a look. It appears that there's funds able to cover that. And so since we haven't actually signed that agreement, it would be possible to continue and make that change should the committee agree with the recommendation. There is provided an impact on the funds. There's a table in there that assesses sort of what that would mean. And it would be from the Arts and Culture and Recreation stream, just to be clear. knowing our previous discussions. So it would reduce the amount slightly in 2022 and 2023, which would be the last 2 years of the 3-year agreement. So we're just looking to see if the board supports this recommendation.
Thank you. Thoughts, everyone?
Sure.
Go ahead.
Yeah, I would support the canoes associations for the 3-year funding of $5,500 a year.
Great.
Yeah, I'll second that.
Further discussion? Any opposed? Motion carries. All right, and one more item on PDIF. So this is,
Sorry, Chair.
go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. Just for clarity, our apologies that the recommendation was not brought forward onto your board cover, but that was a recommendation, first of all, to rescind a portion of the January 27, 2021 resolution, as well as issue the new resolution for 3-year term. Because we already had a resolution in place from January of 2021, which is highlighted on page 59 of your report. If we could rescind the yellow highlighted portion as well, that permitted them to receive the seed funding. Gotcha. So that they're not receiving 2 funding envelopes, that would be appreciated. Thank you.
I'll make that motion to rescind that.
Moved by Director Mack, seconded by Director Kennedy. Any opposed? Motion carries. And so the other resolution still stands though, right, Ms. Homer? I don't have to redo that. Okay.
That's correct, Chair. The second part is what was moved and carried already.
Okay, perfect, thank you. Okay, last is a request for decision amendment to the PDIF policy. These are some of the items we just discussed. Ms. Campbell.
Thank you, Chair. So this is a report. It's presenting the amendments that we did just discuss. The policy does include the specific reporting date of December 1. So we're asking to move that to a mid-November date, just to allow for that administration time. And it also allows for new applications to, the policy amendment allows for new applications to be heard at either the December or the January PVIS meeting, just to provide some, to provide enough space in the 2 meetings to go through all those applications, knowing that it was significant. It can add a significant load to those meetings. So they are minor amendments. They're in highlighted in the policy attached. And these can be, if approved, would be included in communication to the applicants once approved.
Any questions?
I'll move the preferred option number 1.
Okay.
Second.
Any further discussion? Any opposed? Motion carries. Awesome.
And Chair, just a reminder that that as well is a recommendation to the board.
Yes.
Thanks.
Okay, great. Thank you very much, Ms. Campbell, for all of that this afternoon. Much appreciated. Enjoy the rest of your day. Decision on late business. Late business, we have none. Director's notice of motion. And then I'll look for a motion to go in camera.
Motion to go in camera.
Seconder. Back.